Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. I am Dr. Susmitha Mallaya, Professor, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. So, in our lecture series today, I am going to deliver a lecture on an overview of customs legislation and its implementation in India. So, you remember we are discussing on the course on socio-economic offences, right? So, why this customs is also, whether the customs is also treated as a socio-economic offense, or is it a white-collar crime, and how it differs. So this lecture aims to provide an in-depth exploration of history, implementation, and significance of Customs Act, with focus on its evolution, key provisions, and role in the modern economies. So to begin with, the introductory part, the Customs Act. It is the cornerstone of the international trade regulation. So customs is associated with the trade. Trade means buying and selling of goods. So here it is the cornerstone of international trade regulation. Why it is domestic may also come or not. Let us see about that. It actually governs the movement of goods across the border. So from one border to another border, when the goods are exported, imported, there its importance comes. Similarly, it ensures compliance with the national law. Suppose, for example, you are exporting any handicrafts materials from India to America. So the laws governing the America also need to be complied with along with the international laws. So ensure compliance with the national laws, then and facilitate economic growth. So the customs is actually a revenue generating mechanism for any country apart from its other impacts. So what are the aspects of Customs Act? We can see that it is the cornerstone for international trade regulation. It governs the movement of goods and borders across the borders, and it ensures compliance with the national laws and facilitate economic growth. So with the term Customs Act, so it is, if you look into this, the term Customs Act is a generic and it applies to various countries. And so primarily we are going to discuss here with reference to the Customs Act and a case study and the prominence, the comprehensive framework supplemented by the global perspective were relevant. Now, what is the importance of the Customs Act? There are four importance we can just briefly look into. One is the economic significance. The Customs Act has got a very economic significance. How? It generates significant government revenue. So, it is a source of revenue for any government concern. So, 2.1 lakh crore was what the revenue generated as per the records that are available. And it regulates trade deficits and support domestic industries. So, our major industrialists or the industries are depending on the import. So for that, it helps. Secondly, as from the national security point of view, you can see that it prevents the inflow of illegal goods like the arms, drugs, and counterfeit currency and curb the illicit trade network. So this is where, this is the part, national security part. This is where we can say the concept of socio-economic as well as the white-collar crime perspective will come. Now, what is the difference? If you see that white collar crime is the subset of the socio-economic offense. Why? Because these type of crimes are done on the occupation. While you are in the occupation, then you are doing it. In your professional capacity, you are doing it. So here, the national security, it will prevent the inflow of the illegal goods like the arms, drugs, and the counterfeiting currency, and it will curb the illicit trade networks. And second is, along with the international compliance. We cannot stand alone. We cannot grow alone. So we need a kind of togetherness from the international perspective as well. So the international compliance aligns with the WTO rules and India's free trade agreements, adopting the harmonized system codes for classification. Having discussed these three importance, the most important aspect is the consumer protection. So this is where we are focusing on. So consumer protection is required because it restricts substandard or hazardous goods and bans harmful substances, ensuring quality and environmental safeguard. So you can see the importance of the Customs Act, how the Customs Act is very important. So majorly from the country's point of view, the Customs Act helps for the economic development or economic growth. And from the country's perspective, again, it will help with the international compliance, many trade trips agreement we are associated with. So that is from the country's perspective. And from the perspective of the consumers are safeguarded because we will not get those products which are of substandard, and we will not get any harmful substance, and the quality goods are ensured. On other side, environmental protection or environmental safeguard also are protected by the customs. From the national security point of view, it will prevent the illegal arms, drugs, and counterfeiting of the currencies coming into our system. So this makes the importance of the Customs Act to be studied and to understand from the general perspective as well as from the socio-economic perspective as well. Now, the next aspect is the historical evolution of the customs legislation, how the history has evolved. So if you look into that, Customs Act or the way the term customs, it is not of a recent origin. It was the early beginnings can be spotted from the centuries. It dates back to the century, ancient civilization, because ancient Egypt and the Greece and the Rome, the taxes were levied on the goods transported across regions to fund the state activity. So what is important is the revenue that is generated from this tax. So taxes are levied on the goods that is imported, that is exported, and from that the revenue is generated, and that is helping for the state activities. So we are expecting the state to take care of us, state to take care of the vulnerable groups, to provide food, shelter, education and all. So the state required revenue, state required money to do all these activities. So from where the state will get? It is from the tax. So taxes are very important, and the taxes or the duty that is levied on these goods are the revenue generated. So that is why if the duties or if the taxes are not levied, or if there some illegal activities are taking place, individually we are not getting affected. You and me are not going to get affected. But in the long run, the country as a whole will get affected. That is why it is having a huge impact. It is a victimless crime. It is a victimless crime or a victimless offenses, where in the long run, the people will find it difficult. You will get those goods which are contrabanded, the currencies that are counterbanded, and the state will be left with no revenue to take care. So all this will create a chaos in the country. So that is why there is a requirement for the law to regulate all this type of activities. Now, the early systems were rudimentary and focusing on the revenue collection rather than the trade regulation. So the earlier times, on the beginning or the historical evolution, we can see that the customs, they were providing only as, or they were focused only for the revenue generation within the state. They were not concerned with any other kind of the trade regulations. So a step further, during the medieval period in Europe, so you can see that we are tracing the historical perspective from the Egypt, Greece, Rome, and in the Europe, the customs duties became formalized as trade routes expanded. So the trading, we remember that India also came under the British rule through the trade. So we can see how much trade is. You can even take a country into your control through the trade. So East India Company, they came here for trading. For the spices, you can see how much they have taken up. So here the Magna Carta, that is of 1215 in England, referred the duties on the goods, indicating early regulatory framework. So we can trace during the medieval period where the trade routes were expanded and it was formalized. Now coming to the third phase, that is the colonial era. So the first is the early beginning, where it was considered as a source of revenue and it has not taken care of the trade regulations. However, in the medieval period, it was taken care like a regulatory framework. Now, during the colonial period, what happened? We know in India, under the British rule, customs duties were introduced to control trade and maximize colonial revenue. That is very important. You can see the Customs Act has got its colonial legislation or colonial origin in India. So, how they have control. First is the Sea Customs Act. So it was not like the Customs Act which we are going to discuss now. It was like the Customs Act of 1878 and it referred to the sea. The Sea Customs Act, and one of the earliest comprehensive legislation in India regulating the maritime trade. So it's very important to understand that the entry for the Britishers to come and rule us, it was through the sea route. And then coming to that, the maritime trade. So it is there, that is where the trade started taking. But if you look into from our perspective, the rulers or the kings, they levy taxes and they're limited to those goods which are produced, and that is for the revenue generation to look after the citizens. So that was also there. It is not that it was not there. But we can see that it has colonized. This is also colonized. The customs was also colonized during the British period. By the first, it was formalized the Sea Customs Act of 1878. And this is the earliest comprehensive legislation in India, but its focus was the maritime trade. So what their focus? It was the maritime trade, because the trade happened through the sea routes. So that is why the importance was given to it. Then let us now look into the pre-independent India and the post-independence India. Now, in the Customs Act in 1962, India relied on the multiple laws. So the Sea Act, so pre-independent India, we have the Sea Customs Act of 1878, and the government imports and exports via sea route and focusing on the revenue collection and preventing smuggling. So their main focus was to prevent the smuggling and revenue collection. So revenue collection, avoiding the smuggling. That was the focus of the Sea Customs Act of 1878. Then came the Land Customs Act. So Land Customs Act was enacted in the year 1924 and it addressed the cross-border trade via land routes, particularly with neighboring countries. So we cannot go much far, but it was with the neighboring countries where the cross-border trade happened, and with the legislation of Land Customs Act of 1924. Then another Indian Tariff Act of 1933, it regulated tariff structure and the trade policies. So this is the three legislations pre-independent India. So what was that? Sea Customs Act of 1878, Land Customs Act of 1924, and the third is the Indian Tariff Act of 1934. Now, what happened in the post-independent India? After the post-independence, we got the Customs Act enacted in 1962. So the present, we are going to focus on the Customs Act of 1962. So this act was enacted on December 13, by replacing the earlier laws. So what were the earlier laws? The Sea Customs Act, Land Customs Act, and the Indian Tariff Act was replaced, and they consolidated and the modernized customs regulations. So consolidation, how? Aligned with the Indian economic policies post-independent India. See, after getting the freedom, it was a major challenge for the India to get economically independent. Economic independence was very important, and for that they need to change those policies. So the aligned with the Indian economic policies post-India, post-independence, the Customs Act of 1962 was enacted to address the emerging challenges. So what was the challenges that India was facing? First is smuggling, trade deficits, and international obligations. So they were facing the challenges because of the smuggling, trade deficits, and the international obligations. So the Customs Act was enacted by consolidating the previous legislations, that is the Sea Act, Land Customs Act, and the Indian Tariff Act. Now, this act, that is the Customs Act of 1962, was influenced how? By the global customs framework, such as those under the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, that is the GATT, established in 1947, which emphasized the standardization trade practices. So, in order to have a standard trade practice, Customs Act of 1962 was enacted by consolidating the previous legislations, which includes the Sea, Land, and the Indian Tariff Act. Now, let us see how the early beginnings of the customs regulated, how the customs were regulated. First, the customs duties have existed for centuries, no doubt, dating back to the ancient civilization. So, it was there from the ancient civilization. And ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, we have discussed this, taxes levied on the goods transported across the regions to fund the state activities. This also we have seen. These early systems were rudimentary and they were focusing on the revenue collection rather than the trade regulations. So, there were absence of trade regulations. So, trade regulations were not there. They were focusing on the revenue collection. Then in the medieval period, we have seen that they have the formalized as the trade routes expanded because the more trade started happening, and the Magna Carta of England referred duties on the goods, indicating the early regulatory frameworks. Then the colonial era, we have seen the Sea Customs Act, one of the earliest and the comprehensive legislations regulating the maritime trade. Now, what are the key provisions? Now, we are going with the second part of the Customs Act, that is the provisions under the Customs Act of 1962. It is a comprehensive legislation with the 161 sections. So, imagine, I am not going to discuss with you 161 sections so that it may take a year, but just we will discuss some important provisions that need to be focused on from our socio-economic perspective. So, it is a comprehensive legislation, and the key areas are the administrative enforcement. It's the first aspect, that is enforcement mechanism. So, this legislation itself provides for the enforcement. Who will enforce this act? Mere having a legislation is not sufficient. It is not sufficient. So, we need somebody to administer or execute those. So, it establishes, so administration enforcement under the Customs Act aims to establish the customs authorities under the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and the Customs, CBIC, and defines customs stations. So, it defines what the customs station means. So, station means a place where your goods will be checked, or the point where the checkposts are there, where when you are transporting the goods, they will look into what are the goods you are transporting, whether you have got the proper license to export, import, all these aspects. So, the customs authorities under the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and the Customs. Now, another is levying and the collection of the duties. So, they are using the word duties. Tax are by the government, but here they are using the terminology of duties, collection of duties. So, the authorizes. So, this act authorizes duties on imported and exported goods based on the Customs Tariff Act of 1975 with the valuation rule. So when you are exporting or importing any particular good, the price at which you can export or import, there is a tariff for it. You cannot just do it below the minimum, and you have to provide certain percentage as the duty. You can of course bring that inside the country, but you have to pay duty for the same. So the import, that is what the levy. So the levying is made under the act by the authorities concerned, and that duties are also collected. Secondly, there are procedures that has been established under the act, that is known as the import and export procedures. So it documents like the bill of entry and the shipping bill of clearance. We all know that whatever we say, it is still shipping, or the shipping industry is one of the most important industry which is generating the revenue for any country for that matter. Most of the goods we can export from country or import to the country through the way of sea. Of course, land are also there, but it may take time. More than the land is the sea. So that is why the import and export procedures. So what is the bill of entry? So when the bill is, that is whenever any goods are brought, there is a concept, that is a document known as the bill of entry and the shipping bill. So that need to be cleared. So that is why the customs authorities are closely associated with the shipping industry. Now, sometimes there are of course prohibitions and restrictions, and this is where our importance comes with respect to the subject, that is the socio-economic offences. Here, the government is empowered to prohibit or restrict certain goods. So this goods is the narcotics and the hazardous materials. Drug trafficking is the huge global problem, and the drugs that are exported for the medicinal purpose is different from those drugs that are counterband or that are used for other purpose. So it is a crime, which is an offense under the NDPS Act. And how the goods are boosted or inserted in the country is through this means of the mechanism, that is through the means of this shipping many a times. So it will be written that this is the goods that is inside, but once you are opening that, you will find that it is not. Sometimes the gold smuggling also happens. There is a limitations how much gold you can bring into a country, but you will bring more gold, and then you may bring so much of things which are banned by the country. So here the government is empowered to prohibit or restrict certain goods, that is example is the narcotic and the hazardous materials. Secondly, the anti-smuggling measures. So the Customs Act also deals with the anti-smuggling measures. That is, it provides wider powers for search, seizure, confiscation, and the penalties for violation. Then it also allows for the provision for the refund and exemptions. It allows duty drawbacks on re-exported goods and grants exemption for the specific purpose. So if it is for any kind of medicinal purpose, the exemptions will be provided. Then there is a appeal or the dispute resolution mechanism, and which establishes the appellate mechanisms and allows for advance ruling on duty liability. So what we can say that the Customs Act of 1962, the major or the key provisions includes 7. I have just taken up. One is the administration and enforcement, then levy and the collection duties, import and export procedure, prohibition and restrictions, anti-smuggling measures, and refunds and exemptions, and appeals and the dispute resolution. Now moving further, let us discuss one by one. Administration and enforcement. What is that? We have 2 authorities under this. One is the customs authorities. What is the aim? The Act establishes the hierarchy of customs officers, including the Commissioner of Customs, Assistant Commissioners, and others under the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. So this CBIC, under that is what the Commissioner also, that is why when the bureaucrats, it is very important that the bureaucrats have very important role to curb this type of menace, saying that they are the authority. So they will come under the authority, the customs authority, And then they have the custom stations. What is this custom station signifies? It defines the port, airport, land custom station for the lawful import and export of the goods. So the two important authorities under the Customs Act are, one is the customs authorities, which includes the Commissioner of Customs, Assistant Commissioner and others. And secondly, we have the custom stations, that is custom station consists of the port, airport, land custom station for the lawful import. So here it is not for the unlawful, it is for the lawful import and export of goods. It's not that you cannot bring the goods in India, you cannot export the goods in India, but what are the goods that can be imported, what are the goods that can be exported will be mentioned by the government. You remember the first legislation which we have discussed regarding the Essential Commodities Act. So it is required to have an authority to see or to make the check and balances with respect to the needs of the people of the country, and the country will exercise its power and to make the balance through the administrative mechanism. Second is respect to the levy and collection of duties. With respect to the customs duties, that's very important, section 12. So section 12 of the Act authorizes the levy of duties on imported and exported goods based on the Customs Tariff Act of 1975. So the customs duties are levied and as per the provision of section 12, and they are authorized for levying the duties, and how much is the percentage, 1%, 2%, 3%, 10%, whatever the duties percentage is provided or will be recommended by the government from time to time. Then valuation. So how the taxes are levied or the duties are levied and collected consists of the customs duty and the valuation. So second aspect, valuation, signifies section 14 and 15. It outlines the method for determining the value of goods for duty calculation aligned with the international standards like the WTO valuation agreement. So this section, that is this section 14 and 15, it consists of the method that will determine the value of the goods for calculation aligned with international standards like the WTO valuation agreement. Moving further, the third aspect is the import and the export procedure. So what is the import and the export? You should read this as export procedures. What are they? One is the bill of entry and the shipping bill. So these are the documents. So the concerned officer will check under as per sections 46 and 50. It is mandatory. The documentation, it can't be orally. You cannot say that yes, we are carrying it, it is 12 grams, 13 grams or this much of kg we are carrying. No, it should be documented. Documentation for the import, that is the bill of entry for in case of the imports, and exports, it is the shipping bill. So this document is very important whenever the export or the import takes place in the country. So they will look into this, the concerned authorities which you have discussed, and after that the clearance, it's very important. So when the goods needs a clearance certificate. So clearance certificate is issued by whom? Clearance certificate is issued by the customs authorities, and for that matter the goods must be cleared by the customs authorities before entering or leaving the country. So when the goods are entering the country, when the goods are leaving the country, when you are exporting it, you need the customs clearance. So you can see how much powerful the customs officials are. Now moving further, there are certain prohibitions and restrictions that is also imposed in or that is also enacted in the Act. What is that? There are section 11 deals with the prohibition of the goods. Certain goods are prohibited. The list will vary from time to time from the needs. So the section 11 empowers the government to prohibit importing and the exporting of the certain goods. Of course, every time the narcotics and the counterfeit of currency, it is always prohibited goods. You cannot bring the narcotic drugs. You cannot bring the counterfeited currency. So that is forever. Apart from that, during the COVID also, there can be restrictions with respect to the what can be imported from the country, what can be exported from the country. All these things will be taken care by the government concerned. And there are certain restricted goods. What are those restricted goods? That is, first, there is wildlife products. That's a very pathetic situation. Like, we have the environmental laws, wildlife laws we have, but majorly the animals are killed for their skin and to make the product. So they are used for, that is where the illegal activities takes place. And sometimes, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act also we have. So all these, those who are doing, or the mastermind who are doing the criminal activities, they use these channels for the exporting and the importing through some other medium. So that is why the goods like wildlife products or the hazardous materials require special permission. So if you are, so remember here, what it is saying is that it is a restricted good. It is not a prohibited good. What is the difference between prohibition and restriction? What is the difference of prohibition and restriction? If you look into that, both of them aims to not to take it. But prohibition means a more criminal, or we can say that more punishable. This says that not at all, at any cost. Whereas restricted means it is, if you get the special permission, then you can import or export. It is not a total prohibition. So restriction is a positive means, not complete negative. However, prohibition, it is a term which is completely negative. That, but at any cost, there is nobody will give you any permission to export or import the narcotic drugs, right? And nobody will give you permission to counterfeit the coins or counterfeit the currency. Do you think so? So they are completely negative prohibition, whereas restricted goods signifies that the materials which require the special permission. Now moving further, we can say that the anti-smuggling measures. So this act consists of the anti-smuggling measures which requires the search and seizure. Search and seizure, section 100 to 110. Provide power for the custom officers to search, seize and confiscate the smuggled goods. So this power is provided to the customs officer. Then it consists of the penalty. So if any person is contravening the provisions of the Custom Act, penalties has been levied under section 112, 114 and it imposes penalties for violations including the fine and imprisonment. So these are the anti-smuggling measures that is part of the Customs Act of 1962 in India. Then we have also seen the provision for the refund and exemptions, as well as the appeals and the dispute resolution mechanism under the Customs Act. What are they? First is the duty drawback. Section 74 allows refund of duties on re-exported goods. What do you mean by the re-exported? So that means you have exported, now again you are re-exporting those goods. So that allows for the, refunding it, right? Allows refunding of on the re-exported goods. Second, that is the exemption. So exception is provided under section 25. It empowers the government to grant exemption for the specific goods or the purpose. So if you are doing, or if you are exporting it for research or for any charity, then that is allowed. So that is one of the aspects. So we have seen during the COVID, we have been exporting certain goods or sanitizers, masks, some foods we were exporting. So that is for, if it was for the charity, that is allowed. And if it is something, if you are, exporting for the research purpose, any materials, okay, then that can also be allowed. So that is the exemption from the duties or re-exported goods. Secondly, the appellate mechanism. What is the appellate mechanism? Section 128 to 131 provide for appeals to the commissioner. Appeals to the commissioner and the Customs, Excise and Service Tax Appellate Tribunal. So we have this special courts to deal with or to decide the dispute with respect to the customs. So that is what the Service Tax Appellate Tribunal. Customs, Excise and Service Tax Appellate Tribunal, we have the appellate mechanism. Apart from that, Section 28 capital E, it allows the importers and exporters to seek clarity on the duty liability before the transactions happens. Now, how this act is implemented? We have seen the authorities under the act. Now, how this is implemented is the third part. So, we have seen the first part, introductory part, second part, the key provisions and authorities under it. Now, how this act is implemented. So, implementation can be looked from first from the institutional framework. So, the institutional framework includes the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, CBIC, and oversees. So, it oversees the implementation of the Customs Act in India. What the key institutions include? First, the custom houses. Custom houses is the major ports and airport have the custom houses for processing the goods. Goods need to be processed. Where it will be processed? It will be processed in the customs house. Then we have the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, DRI. So the term itself signifies intelligence. So Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, they focus on the anti-smuggling and enforcement. And third, we have the Customs Commissionerate. Regional officers ensure the compliance and the revenue collection. So, from the institutional framework, from the institutional point of view, we have these three. One is the Customs House, second is the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, and we have the Customs Commissioners, that is the regional officers, ensure the compliance and the revenue collection. Then, the another part is the technological advancement. We are now speaking about, we are now living in a technological world. I am reaching to you through the technology. The lectures are getting recorded. That is also the technology. So, technological advancement. So, implementation has evolved with the technology. When in 1990s, we opened up our economy for the liberalized policies. And we have come up with a lot of import and export. Then that became a platform. In 1990s, the customs EDI system introduced in 1990s. So it digitized customs process, reducing paperwork and clearance times. Having the paperwork is one of the crucial aspects. So the papers, to check the papers manually, it used to take time. And go through each and every aspect of it and to detect any errors in the document, it used to take a lot of time. It required time. It was the best way, I may say, but it was a time consuming, right? But now we can see that in 1990s, they have introduced the digitized. So the customs processes were digitalized. Now, what happened after that, coming to the moving further with 2020, after 1990, in 2020, we have the faceless assessment. So, it introduced in 2020, enables the remote assessment of the customs documents, enhancing the efficiency. So, now through the custom windows, the goods will be scanned and then they will be able to assess the documents as well as the efficiency. So, they became more efficient. And in between, in 2016, so 1990s, they have started with the digitalization work. And in 2016 is again another cornerstone where the single window interface facilitating trade, SWIFT, that is single window interface for facilitating trade, which is known as the SWIFT, and it was launched. It integrated the multiple agencies, that is the Food Security of India, then DGFT for the faster clearances. So we can see that 2020, it has been clearly, we have come to a stage where the faceless assessment started. But prior to that, the whole technological advancement started in the year 1990, followed by the SWIFT system in 2016. And 2020, we got the faceless assessment system for the importing and exporting of the goods within India. That is one of the aspects. Secondly, what are the challenges? Having said this, there are a lot of challenges in implementation of these customs provisions. What are they? One is the smuggling and evasion. You cannot stop the smuggling and evasion at any cost because that is so much ingrained that we have seen from the ancient times. It started and it is still continuing, but the ways and the means through which it is done has been changed. That's the only difference. And the authorities also changed from the earlier paper to the technology. So that's a change we can see, but we cannot totally stop such aspects. So smuggling, the challenging is, despite the strict measures, even if we have the strict measures, smuggling of the gold. So what are the major goods that are smuggled? One is the gold, narcotics, and the electronics. There are no other ways. We can see in the newspaper. Even those political parties or the political or the film affair, we can see the news through the newspapers only. I'm referring to this much of gold has been smuggled. This person has been caught for the narcotic use of consumption or for possessing such narcotic drugs. We have seen through the newspaper that every time this becomes a very sensational news when it becomes to be some kind of the important personalities. Otherwise, also the normal people also may be involved in it, but that is not. Media is also not coming with that kind of speculations, but they are caught by the customs authorities, no doubt for that. So this is one of the challenge. Even if from the paper to the paperless we have moved, from the face to the faceless we have moved, but still it's a challenge how to catch or how to curb the smuggling and evasion, especially with respect to the gold, with respect to the narcotics, and with respect to the electronic goods. Second is the corruption. This is where our course comes, corruption. How we will stop the corruption. So many a times in connivance or in tune with the customs authorities, by bribing them, the goods are imported. They may be paid commission, and that is the terminology that is used, not corruption. So the person will not be knowing that he is the part of the corruption racket, but he will be told this is the practice, this is the normal practice. Okay, so the corruption, instances of the bribery and the collusion have occasionally undermined enforcement. So this becomes a very challenge. The person who needs to take care or who needs to regulate himself is violating the rules, himself is violating the law, then who will take care of such things, right? So that's a challenge. Another is the capacity constraints. Capacity constraints, we have that. Even if the goods are contraband goods have been confiscated, where to keep such goods? How we will take care of it? How from there it cannot be, again circulated or replaced with some other goods, right? So high trade volumes strain infrastructure at major ports. So the major ports are also not free, or they are also not having the sufficient, we can say that mechanism or infrastructure to take care of the imported goods. Now moving further, implementation aspect of the Customs Act, we have seen that just to brief out what we have discussed now with respect to the implementation. One is the institutional framework. Second is the technological advancement. What are they? CBIC oversees the policy and enforcement. Then we have the customs houses at the major airports and the ports, and the Directorate of the Revenue Intelligence focuses on the anti-smuggling. And from the technological advancements we have seen, we have the Indian Customs EDI system which digitizes the processes. We have the single window SWIFT, single window interface for facilitating trade, integrates agencies. We have the faceless assessment enables remote document processing. And the challenges, as just now we have discussed, it is the smuggling, occasional corruption, and infrastructure strain due to the high trade volume. So this is the gist of what we have discussed with earlier, the challenges which we are facing with respect to the implementation of the Customs Act. Now, moving further is the importance. What is the importance of this Customs Act? So we have seen the object, the Customs Act, that is for the state, generating the state revenue, and we have seen the authorities under it. Then what are the means by which the taxes has been, the duties has been taken up. We have seen how it is implemented, and now what is the important? That is, there are three important aspects. That is the economic, it plays a major role in the economic perspective, from the social perspective, and the security domains. How from the social perspective the Customs Act become important? Let us take an example. The society we are living in, we need the goods which are healthy, which are of good value, which are not contrabanded. And if the customs authorities, if they are not, there are other persons, there are other institutions which are maintaining the quality control. However, if certain goods are imported more in our country, it will create a surplus. It will create a surplus in our country, and it may in turn harm the society as a whole. And if there are loopholes where the taxes are not levied or the corruption happens, then as a whole, later on the goods that are available will be of high value. Then it is again difficult for the people to afford such goods. So socially, consumers are getting affected. Economically, as a country as a whole, growth will get hampered. And the security is a major concern, where the arms and the substances which are harmful can be brought. So these are the three perspectives. Now, economic significance, we can see that the revenue generation, 2.1 lakh crore revenue is generated. Customs duties contribute for the government revenue. And in 2023 and 24, this is a figure, India collected approximately 2.1 lakh crore in the customs revenue. So you can see how much revenue has been collected in our country. Then second is the trade regulation. So this act balances the trade deficits by controlling imports and promoting exports through the duty drawbacks and incentives. Then it supports the domestic industry. The domestic industry is supported by protective tariff shield local industries from unfair foreign competition. So that is very important, that it protects the unfair foreign competition. Then moving further, we have from the national security point of view, the border control. So it requires the border control. The act prevents the inflow of illegal goods, such as arms, drugs, and counterfeit currency, safeguarding the national security. So if the arms are imported in our country, and if there is no one to check it in the points, then it will amount for the terrorist activities to inside the country. We have seen, we have witnessed. So that is very important that at the border level, it should be checked what the goods they are taking. Sometimes in the goods inside there will be the weapons. So in the check post, if that is not checked, so it will create again, it is a point where the corruption also may take place. So inside the, sometimes human trafficking, humans are used for smuggling purpose. How? Sometimes, in their stomach and all, the gold is deposited, gold is kept, and then once they come to, they will go to the hospitals, and from there it will be removed. So there are a lot of people who are become the carriers. So that is why the customs authorities even scan this type of things. We are reading from the newspapers, or the cases are reported. Another is the anti-smuggling. That is a robust enforcement mechanism to curb the illicit trade networks. Now, from the international compliance perspective, WTO and FTA compliance. So we need to align with the World Trade Organization, that is the WTO rules, and India's free trade agreement. So we are party to it. So India's free trade agreement, FTAs, with the countries like the Japan, ASEAN, and the South Korea. So international compliance is also required with respect to the Customs Act. And then we need to have a harmonized system, that is the HS codes. The Act adopts HS codes for the standardization, classification of the goods, which facilitate the global trade. Now, from the consumer protection and the economic reforms and the globalization, what is there? One is the quality control. From the consumer protection point of view, there is a quality check. Quality is controlled with respect to the goods that are imported. Then we have the environmental safeguards. What are those environmental safeguards? The environmental safeguards constitute the ban on harmful substances. There is a ban on harmful substances, ozone depleting chemicals aligned with the international environmental protocols. So imagine this legislation also safeguards the environment. That's why it's very important. Now we need to protect our environment from harm. And how the Customs Act is helping is it ban the harmful substances to be imported in the country. Next aspect is ease in doing the business. So ease in doing the business, they have streamlined the processes like the SWIFT and faceless assessment enhance the India's ranking in the global trade index. Similarly, attracting the foreign direct investment. We have opened up our economy in 1990s for the LPG, liberalized privatization and the globalization. So we need to attract the foreign direct investors to come and invest in our country. So a transparent customs, that is why it is very important. We need to have a transparent customs framework, encourage foreign investment by ensuring the predictability in trade regulations. So consumer protection and the economic reforms, the globalization point of view also, the Customs Act plays a very important role. Now, what are the global perspective and the future directions? The global trends is the digitalization. We are now digitalized. The documents need to be digitalized. And e-customs, so what is that? E-customs. Customs need to be the e-customs and the blockchain for the supply chain transparency. It should be transparent. Then trade facilitation, that is agreements like the WTO, FTA for the faster clearances. Then sustainability includes the restrictions on the environmentally harmful goods. Then futurely, now we are living in the age of AI, artificial intelligence, AI-driven risk management for the fraud detection. So you can ask the AI whether a person is importing his goods is banned or not. So AI will just check it and then he will give. So we are all taking the voice that I'm telling you, that is AI is also taking it. So you know there are a lot of things that the AI-driven industries are progressing. Now there is no ban on them to check whether they are getting the permission or not. So artificial intelligence risk management can be used in a positive way for that. Then the green customs, that is the enhanced focus on the environmentally sensitive goods. These are all for the future directions. Then the global integration, that is the deeper alignment with the international frameworks. Now what are the recent amendments and that has taken place? One is the amendment that happened with the Finance Act of 2016, that is introduced the provision for the deferred payment duties to ease the cash flow for the trusted importers. Then we have the Finance Act of 2020. It strengthened anti-smuggling provisions and introduced faceless assessment. Customs rules of 2020 framed, and it has administration rules of origin under the trade agreements rules of 20 ensure the compliance with the FTA rules to prevent the misuse of the concessions that is provided. And what is the future directions? We already discussed. There is the artificial intelligence. We need to have the green customs, and there is a need for the global integration. Now let us discuss the recent case laws, that is from 2023 to 25. The 4 significant case laws that is relating to the Customs Act are based on the judicial development. First is the revenue lacked jurisdiction to pass provisional attachment order under section 110 of the MP High. This is given by the Madhya Pradesh High Court. The case is unnamed petitioner versus customs authorities. Issue is whether the customs authorities can issue provisional attachment order under section 110(5) during the pending investigation. The Madhya Pradesh High Court held that the Revenue Department lacks jurisdiction. So, the Revenue Department lacks jurisdiction to issue the provisional attachment order under section 5. We have seen who is the commissioner. So, we have the authorities has been provided, mentioned under the Act. When the investigation is ongoing, the attachment order cannot be passed as it violates the procedural fairness and the statutory limits. And what is the impact of this decision? Impact is that it reinforces the checks on the customs authorities' powers, ensures attachment are justified and procedurally sound. Second is the mandatory personal hearing under section 28 subclause 8. It cannot be denied. That is what the Kerala High Court in 2025 held, which is a very recent case. The unnamed petitioner, again the Customs Department. whether the authorities can bypass the mandatory personal hearing under Section 28 subclause 8 by citing special provisions like Section 122A. The Kerala High Court ruled that personal hearing under Section 28 subclause 8 is mandatory for issuing demand notices, and special provisions like Section 122A cannot override these requirements. What is the impact? It strengthens the procedural fairness and ensures the importers, exporters have an opportunity to present their case before the penalties or the demands are imposed. Then the Supreme Court validates the Railways Authority to impose misdeclaration penalties into 2023. So whenever you are bringing any goods, you need to declare that goods that you are bringing. So the misdeclaration penalty is imposed. So it is again the unnamed case with regard to the taxmanagement.com in India. You can see that issue is Indian Railways as a carrier can impose penalties for misdeclaration of the goods under the Customs Act. The Supreme Court upheld the Railways Authority to impose penalties for misdeclaration, reinforcing their role in customs compliance. So impact is it clarifies the scope of carriers' responsibility in preventing the misdeclaration, enhancing the importment. So these three cases we can see that the court has different high courts, including the Supreme Court, has emphasized the importance for having or they upheld the procedural regularities that has been mentioned. And another case is the minor invoice number mismatch does not justify the penalty in 2024. Again, the issue was whether a minor mismatch, there was only a minor mismatch in the invoice number warrant the penalty under the Customs Act. The court ruled that the technical errors such as a minor invoice number mismatch do not justify penalties. You cannot just penalize a person because it is a mismatch. Sometimes it happens, human error happens, right? So there is no intent. So intention is also one of the aspects that need to be looked into. So it protects the genuine importers from harsh penalties for clerical errors, promoting fairness in the importance. So now coming to the conclusion part, what we can see is that the Customs Act exemplified the Indian Customs Act as a dynamic framework that has evolved from the rudimentary revenue collection to a sophisticated system balancing the trade facilitation, revenue generation, and the national security. So what are the three aspects, important aspects to keywords? That is the revenue collection, then the national security, and then the sophisticated balancing the trade. So the modern technology, so its implementation through the modern technology and institutional reforms has made a tool for the economic growth and the global integration. So as the trade complexities increase, the Act's adaptability will remain crucial in addressing the emerging challenges like the digital trade, environmental concerns, and the geopolitical shifts. So we can say that this Customs Act plays a very important role to curb the socio-economic or socio-economic offences in India. And this act is such a best piece of legislation. It includes the procedural as well as the penalties has been provided for its violation. And if we are maintaining the balance, it is the act which will give the economic progress for a country. With that, I am concluding the lecture on the overview of the Customs Act legislation in India. So, thank you.
Hello and welcome to this piece of literary snippet. We usually know William Shakespeare as the most revered figure in the history of English literature. But we often tend to forget that he has also been one of the most hated figures in literature. And here I am not talking only about those boys and girls who have to memorize long sections from Macbeth or King Lear or Julius Caesar before they can go and sit for their school or college exams. But I am also talking about people who are themselves quite famous authors. Tolstoy, for instance, considered the writings of Shakespeare to be, and I quote, crude, immoral, vulgar, and senseless. George Bernard Shaw absolutely loathed Shakespeare, as he did Homer. But perhaps no other criticism about Shakespeare is more damaging than the one which says that Shakespeare is a marvelous storyteller, provided someone has told him the story earlier. Now, this piece of criticism is particularly damaging because it is true. None of Shakespeare's plays contain any original story whatsoever. They are all written using pre-existing materials, pre-existing stories. Now, does that diminish the stature of Shakespeare as a dramatist? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. See you in the next episode of Literary Snippets.